In Persona 5, there are many parts of the world, all working together to craft a detailed and interesting narrative. In a 100+ hour game, many things can start to blend together and lose their thematic meaning. After all, if you look at anything long enough, even the most critical eyes can become desensitized. And in such an engrossing game, I feel it can be easy to overlook some of the more interesting aspects. But even still, it is fair to say that some parts of the game hold more thematic relevance than others, and nowhere is that put on better display than in the bosses. Persona 5 is a game defined by its strong sense of personality and theme, and we see that reflected in each fight that caps off an arc. Whether it be as simple as the first boss fight against Kamoshida, or a duel for the fate of mankind with Yaldabaoth, there is never any shortage of interesting threads to unravel. So with that in mind, I want to look at the bosses of this game and understand why they're represented in the ways that they are, and how their true forms relate to their character arcs. But I've got to be honest, there are a total of 8 bosses in this game and 1 new to Royale, each sporting their own backstory, lore, and meaning. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of them in one video. Today, I'm taking a look at the first 3. Kamoshida, Madarame, and Kanashiro. And without any further ado, let's just jump right into things and take a look at Kamoshida's boss form and how it relates to his character. After securing the route to the treasure in the first palace, the Phantom Thieves square off against what they imagine will be the Shadow Kamoshida that they've seen throughout the story so far. Yet as it turns out, reality is much more shocking. Kamoshida loses his composure and transforms into Asmodeus, starting the boss fight. Kamoshida's true form is a bloated pink monster that features some of the key characteristics from his human form. He wears a comically large crown, is completely nude, and now features bright pink skin. He also has an unnervingly long tongue, which he uses to scoop up naked subjects from his chalice, the trophy of obsession. Furthering this theme of royalty and monarchy is his decadent fur cape that matches the gaudy crown that sits atop his messy, overgrown hair. Aside from that, he also wields multiple golden utensils in his 4 arms, further representing the theme of decadence and tackiness. Now, obviously there's a lot of deliberate theming happening here, so let's try to break things down and understand them a little bit better. This disgusting form is meant to represent Kamoshida's extreme gluttony, as is evidenced by the bloated and exaggerated features on his body. Features like his cape and crown are physical manifestations of the delusion that he's fallen into, and the surrounding area reinforces these themes even more. With statues of scantily clad female torsos holding up the paths that lead to the treasure room, we can see his lust on full display. More than that, we need look no further than the trophy of obsession that he covets during the fight. The trophy is obviously a metaverse representation of the various accomplishments that he achieved as a professional athlete, and as such, it's a major source of ego for him. This is shown by its healing properties that he uses throughout the fight. All of this exaggeration is meant to convey the theme that this man has turned into a demonic representation of lust, one of the infamous 7 deadly sins, which is a common theme amongst bosses in P5R. But things don't quite end there, as there may also be a real-life inspiration behind Kamoshida. Many speculate that Kamoshida and his arc are based on the real-life professional judo gold medalist and coach Masato Uchishiba, who was stripped of all of his awards after being convicted on charges of sexual harassment. Now, this was a very notable case in Japan, especially around the time of Persona 5's development, so it's entirely possible that this formed the basis for Kamoshida in-game. But until further comment from the developers, it remains little more than speculation. Now, moving right along, next we have the disgraced artist Ichiryusei Madarame, one of my personal favorites. Now, Madarame's boss form is rather simplistic in comparison to others in the game. His body, for the most part in the fight, is little more than a face split into 4 paintings. 1 for the mouth, 1 for the nose, and 2 for the eyes. This is obviously a nod to his status as an artist, but looking a bit closer, we can make some key inferences about this boss. Each painting is a bright and vibrant gold, fitting with his motif of vanity. And speaking of vanity, this demon form is called Azazel, a being who in the Bible taught various skills to human, most notably cosmetics. Now, this of course coincides with Madarame's affinity for art, yet in this case, Madarame's art is on the canvas rather than on one's face. But cosmetics have traditionally been seen from a biblical perspective as a somewhat vain pursuit. So from that, we can start to understand why he is called Azazel in his boss form. Another clever reference comes in the names of his moves. All of Madarame's moves are just renamed skills from the game. For example, Maelstrom is just Garula, Dust Flurry is Magarula, and Silent Snowscape is simply Bufula. None of these moves hold any special properties or unique effects that make them any different than any other in the game. And this drives home the point that Madarame feels compelled to steal his ideas, and has no ability to create unique works anymore. Now at this point you may be wondering, what sin does Madarame represent? And while pride may seem like a fitting vice, unfortunately another boss in this game already laid claim to that one. In reality, Madarame is a bit of an exception to the rule, as he doesn't technically represent one of the 7 deadly sins. But if we look into real life history, we can find that he isn't all that much of an exception. The notion of 7 deadly sins was popularized by Pope Gregory the Great when he listed them to the people. But before that point, other prominent theologian monks had preached about 8 deadly vices, among them being vainglory. Now, vainglory is the aspiration for excessive fame and praise with a distinct lack of merit. This concept is heavily related to vanity, and as such, many players speculate that Madarame is meant to represent this vice rather than one of the 7 deadly sins. And I mean, this just makes sense. One of the bosses had to have something that wasn't one of the 7 deadly sins, as there are only 7 sins and 8 bosses, 9 if you count Maruki. But to see even further into these connections, we can look to his real-life inspiration, found in Toyotomi Hideyoshi. In history, Hideyoshi is remembered for writing off of the successes and skills of those around him, just like Madarame does in-game. But what's even more interesting is that Hideyoshi was the target that Ishikawa Goemon failed to assassinate, leading to his death. This is of course a deliberate connection to Yusuke's Goemon, and if you want to learn more about that in depth, check out my Persona Compendium on Goemon. Link in the description. Now last but certainly not least, we have Junya Kanashiro. Kanashiro is of course the ruler of the Third Palace, which is all themed around banks, money, and greed. His boss form is a massive bank vault looking pig robot. The machine is made entirely from solid thick metal, just like you would find holding money or valuables in any bank. And in place of a nose, there is a literal vault door, from which an interior filled with cash can be accessed. Then we have the form factor of a pig itself, which is an obvious symbol of gluttony and greed. Between these two key features, we can see a connection to the main sin that Kanashiro represents, which is of course, gluttony. Banks are places of extreme wealth, and always have been. The fact that Kanashiro sees himself as a bank alludes to the absurd amount of money that he already has, but more than that, it speaks towards his desire to collect more and more wealth and hoard it in one place. Then of course, pigs have always been symbolic of greed and gluttony, and this needs little explanation. He literally pigs out on all the things he wants, and we see that when he's in his club in the real world. But more than anything, he devotes his time to inflating his own wealth, despite the fact that he has much more than he could ever hope to spend. But I can already hear you typing in the comments, technically Kanashiro isn't the giant pig robot. Instead, his shadow form mutates into a strange fly-like creature, with compound eyes, grotesque wings, and fly-like behaviors, such as twitching and rubbing his hands and other mannerisms. This form could be a reference to the demon Beelzebub, which shares the name with him, as his demon form is dubbed Baal, another way to refer to Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. And from a real-world perspective, it's speculated that Kanashiro could be based on Tsubasa Yozawa, a real-life hedonistic entrepreneur who was infamous for creating and pushing a scam course with the title How to Gain 100 Million Yen in 1 Second. Obviously a promise no real person could make good on. So all of this put together creates the impression of extreme gluttony and avarice, thus reinforcing the themes core to Kanashiro's arc. I think these 3 bosses alone exemplify one of the core conceits of my channel, and arguably the purpose of these videos, which is to convey the message that Persona 5 is a game filled with theming in all aspects of its being, from the character writing to game design. Each important element of the game holds something of interest that can be examined further for more content. I recently got my hands on an English copy of the Persona 5 art book, and just after a cursory skim of it, I was able to find so much interesting information that gave me the ideas to make this video. While it may not be for everyone, I think that Persona 5 really does represent something special, and I can't wait to look even further into it next time when we cover the next 3 bosses. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I don't want to take up too much of your time with this outro, but if you liked what I had to say, that's great. It would really help me if you left a like or even hit the subscribe button. Recently, YouTube hasn't been doing a great job of telling people about my videos, but fans like you hitting those buttons can make a world of difference for me, and it allows me to make bigger and better content. So if you want to see more stuff from me more often, perhaps consider it. If you want to know what I'm up to when I'm not on YouTube, feel free to check out my Twitter, where I'm sometimes active. But with all that YouTube stuff out of the way, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.